Good morning, noon, evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Alegende and welcome back to World of Tanks and the NBTT'ay Replay series. And today we are featuring Too Silly For You in his KV-2. And funny thing about Too Silly For You in his KV-2, there were actually multiple replays of him in his KV-2 that, well, would be able to achieve a feature on this series. And well, we're gonna see why, because right here we are off to a great start. Yes, that must have hurt. So you see that Too Silly For You has a lot of knowledge how to play the KV-2, when to wait for the first enemy to appear and completely annihilate them, because most of the times the first enemy tank you see is the enemy light tank, and especially on Erlenberg, not Erlenberg, Siegfried line, it's quite obvious where those will peak. And he saw him coming, so well, 1 + 1 is 2, put 2 and 2 together and you get that kind of a beautiful shot. But KV-2, we know how it rolls. I mean, what's actually so interesting about this replay is just a KV-2 that one-shots pretty much everything. And you know the memes, it's funny to watch, but what can you learn from it? Well, Too Silly For You does actually do a lot of the correct plays right here. For example, he is being quite careful traversing further into the city, since he hasn't got enough of support yet in the nearby location which he is occupying. But after a while he noticed that no enemy is peeking from there, so he goes slowly and slowly further and further, just showing us that he has a very good insight of which locations to peek and which locations to avoid from now. But now another KV-2 has joined his location here in the town, and Too Silly For You immediately feels a little bit more confident to traverse further and to make that life of the Patriot a whole lot worse. Now, first, very good thing, he saw the Patriot reverse. He estimated that the Patriot might reverse even further, again setting up this ambush, being fully aimed once again, just like we saw with that AMX. But now he noticed that, well, he's not going to pick, but well, the enemy KV-2 does. Some excellent reaction right there, even though of course it's quite lucky that he also hit and bent that shot. But it's kind of deserved. I mean, that quick of a reflex on that situation, on that peak of the enemy KV-2, would be a kind of a robbery if he didn't hit that. So he did actually do some damage against the Patriot right there, fortunately getting some shots back, but hell, he did 400 and the Patriot only 200, so good trade. So he retreated back, knowing that he has to reload and knowing that the Patriot also has the other KV-2 to fire at. Now he takes another shot from the Patriot and hopefully, unfortunately, Too Silly is not able to shut down the Patriot, and now the trade is somewhat worse. But despite of that, that is a tier 8 heavy tank and Too Silly is only, in this case, a tier 6 heavy tank. So, generally speaking, this was a good trade. Even though he had some help, he still did, well, 600 damage towards the Patriot, which is quite a substantial amount of health, even for that thing. And at this moment he's just showing off, I guess. I mean, he barely aims, just let the hand of Stalin guide the shot right into the side of the enemy KV-2. That's the second enemy KV-2 he just full on destroyed. Also, that shows that Soviet bias is not 100% in the game. Otherwise we have seen a different result. But yeah, and that is almost, well, quite the conclusion of the game. And finally, against the Dikke Max, he unfortunately isn't able to fire on time before the Aster V shuts him down. But in this case, it isn't really that hard to figure out that the rest of the team could handle the last remaining 2 tank destroyers fairly easily. And with that, it's a victory for 2 Silly. Not a lot of medals, but still an ace tanker alongside with a nice high caliber medal with dealing 3600 damage, which is pretty good at tier 6. Alongside with a fairly good amount of experience, because don't forget that when you fire and damage tanks that are tiers higher than you, you gain substantial amount of experience from that. So most of the times, even though he fired, so he's one-shotted only tier, well, 2 tier 7s and 2 tier 6s, he still did also quite a lot of damage towards that Patriot, all adding up towards this quite high amount of experience. And that alongside, of course, a very good amount of profit, because he was only firing HE, and of course HE in general doesn't have the highest amount of ammunition cost. But yeah, a lot of derping around, deleting enemy tanks, but again, what was now actually some very good points we can learn from this battle? Well, he saw positioning, ambushing, and having good knowledge about when to retreat and when to advance. So the positioning was very obvious, not going too far without enough support of your team. The ambushing we saw against that AMX, and also somewhat against that Patriot, anticipating that your enemies might appear there. When you have a gun that big and you will hit and pen, it is very rewarding to do such a strategy. And finally, knowing when to retreat and when to advance is quite simple, knowing the amount of time that you need to reload, because high caliber derp guns have quite a high reload. So during that time you really want to be at as best possible cover, which 2 Silly did very well, except for one time that he misjudged one-shotting the Patriot, which didn't happen, but that's not really a fault of his, more of a case of the biggest downside of firing HE continuously is that sometimes when you don't pen, the damage can be a bit disappointed. And this will especially happen in the future after the next 1.13 update, where HE might penetrate more occasions, making the KV-2 stronger, but in my opinion, most cases it is just dealing a good amount of damage without penning the shots, which is going to decline drastically after that update. So do what 2 Silly does here and make sure that you pen your shots or have some very quick no-scope responses. Might also help, but like that in a more serious tone, just waiting for an ambush position, outflanking maneuver, where we saw that was possible. And with that, that's the end of the video. Hoped you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Laters.